In this video we will dive into RxJS and reactive programming, and just for you to know, this video is a part of my full course about RxJS. But if you just want to start with learning RxJS, let's jump right into it. Welcome to my course about RxJS. It's so great to have you here. And in this course you will learn everything that you need to know about RxJS, observables and streams. We will start with an empty folder and learn all needed RxJS methods, how they are working and what are the best ways to use them. You will learn how to convert different data types to the streams, combine them, work with API, store and share state from RxJS across the whole application, and much more. We will use Angular as a framework to showcase RxJS, but no Angular knowledge is mandatory, and the whole focus will be anyway on RxJS. In this course you won't find any dry documentation, only functions and tasks for the real projects. Additionally, you will have several tasks across the course that you can try and implement yourself. By the end of this course, you will be able to use RxJS in a project of any complexity. Who am I? My name is ekaterina and I am a web developer with more than 13 years of experience, as well as a professional instructor with various courses regarding different web technologies. I did my best to put all my knowledge inside this course and I want to share it with you. So welcome on board and let's get started. Before we start learning, I want to mention the editor that I recommend you to write code. If for some reason you still don't know what editor to use, I highly recommend you to use VS Code. As you can see here, this is an open source editor which works on all operational systems, it is completely free, and it is really nice for syntax highlighting and auto-importing different stuff inside the project through our course. So if you're not sure what to use, just download it from the official website. Another tool that you might want to use for our course is called Prettier. It is an optional tool, you can live without it, but it is really amazing. If you don't know yet, Prettier is an opinionated code formatter. What does it mean? It will format your code just by default without any additional configuration, which actually means you can focus not on intending your code, but on writing your code. And here is an example. On official website we have some code on the left which is not prettified, and Prettier will prettify it to the code that you can see on the right. The main idea is that you must use an editor like VS Code, for example, where you can install Prettier as a package, and then you can simply save your file, and with every single save your file will be prettified. As you can see here, I opened some other project, and if I'm just intending my code completely wrong and I'm hitting save, my whole code is prettified and I should not think how to intend it correctly. And the last thing that I want to mention is that under every single video when we wrote some code, you can find the source code, so you can just download the code of the lecture from there, start the project and compare it if you have some problems. In this video we will generate and prepare a project to start writing RxJS code. The main question is, what project do we want? Essentially, RxJS is a library, so we could write everything just in plain JavaScript. But essentially most people would use RxJS together with Angular, and even if you don't plan to use it with Angular, it is much easier to show you how it works with the framework which supports RxJS out of the box and additionally has TypeScript to validate and check all our inputs. This is why for this course we will generate an empty Angular project. And our first step here is obviously to install Node.js on your machine. If you don't have it, you can jump to nodejs.org and download Node.js here. You can select current version or LTS. I highly recommend to always install LTS version because it is more stable. After installation you can jump to the console and run node-version, and if you are getting here some version, like 20 or 21, you are totally fine. Our next step is to generate an Angular project, and typically people will install Angular CLI as a global command line tool in order to generate Angular project. I won't use that because we can do exactly the same through command npx. And if you don't know, together with Node.js, we're getting npx, which allows us to install any CLI tool and use it. In this case here, I'm writing npx-p Angular CLI 17, which essentially means that I want to install a CLI for the Angular of 17th version, and here is a command ng-new RxJS course, which will generate for me a new project with the name RxJS course. It is totally fine if you have ng installed globally. You can simply run then ng-new and RxJS course without this prefix. But why it is really amazing to use such prefix? Because it allows you to easily switch between different CLI versions. For example, here I can write not 17 but 16 and then use another CLI. If you have just a single global installation, this is not possible. So I'm hitting here enter and we're getting a question. Do we need to install this package? Yes, we do. As you can see, it is installed. Now we're getting some questions from Angular itself. What format for style sheets we want to use? We don't really care. Let it be CSS. Do we need server-side rendering? No, we don't. And now our project is generated. We don't have any errors, so we can jump inside our new folder RxJS course and start this web server. It will be npm start. As you can see, our project was started on localhost 4200. And here in browser, you can see that it is working. Now let's look on our code. Here is our project, RxJS course, and we're interested to clean it a little bit. This is why I am jumping inside source, app, and here we have lots of stuff. Inside HTML, we don't need anything at all except this router outlet on the bottom, which essentially means we can remove everything completely and just leave here router outlet. Now we can jump inside TS file and remove here style URL, we don't need that, and title, it is also not needed. Now we can safely remove this file app component CSS and also app component spec.ts. And just for testing, let's write inside our app component HTML h1 with RxJS course. Let's save this and look in browser. As you can see, we're getting the title RxJS course and our project is fully ready to start development. The first and the most important goal is to understand how RxJS is working. And it is based on the pattern of observables and observer. Let's have a look on this image. As you can see here, we have some data provider. Doesn't really matter what is it. It can be data from the API call, just some local array that you want to transform to observable. It can be a DOM event of clicking, anything that you want. What we are doing, we transform the data from data provider to our observable. So what is our observable? It is just a stream of data. The main idea is that we also have observers, and observers is something which observe this data, which essentially means these are our subscribers. And every single time when we are getting some new data inside our observable, this observable notifies all our subscribers or observers about this new data. So just imagine we have a data provider and we got a list of users. This list of users is going to our observable, and then this observable notifies all our subscribers that we are getting inside a list of users, and then the subscribers can use this data. And the most important idea is that this data provider can be anything, and then all this stuff with observable and subscribers is working in exactly the same way in every condition. It can work with synchronous code, asynchronous code, anything that you want. In this video, we will look onto RxJS functions which are of and from. As you can see here, I opened our app component TS and I want to write some code inside. And to simplify understanding, I want to just create here a constructor because it's a class and pack all our code inside. So how we can create a stream of data? We can write here that we have a stream of data, for example, numbers, and we're calling here an auth function. As you can see, it was auto-imported from RxJS, and inside we can paste some value. In our case, I want to write an array with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What it does for us, it creates an observable of number array. Here you can see its data type. What does it mean? What is an observable at all? We talked about it in the previous video. We're creating our observable, and this is our stream of data, which actually means this is our main point that has some data inside, and it will notify all our subscribers when it gets new data. So our number is an observable with an array of numbers inside. And actually the recommended code style of creating observables is by using $ at the end. In this case, we are showing, okay, this is an observable. So we successfully created an observable. Now we need to create some subscribers or observers. And in order to do that, we can just call our observable .subscribe, and inside we're providing a callback, which is a function. And actually here inside we are getting access to the data that we are getting from our observable. So let's write here data, and we can console log subscriber, and here will be our data, which essentially means this is our subscriber. We subscribed to our observable. We have this callback. It will be called every single time when the value inside our observable was changed. As you can see in browser, we're getting a console log subscriber, and here is our value from 1 to 5, which essentially means we once created our observable, we put inside this data, then we subscribed to it, and we wrote a console log. And the operator that we used here is called auth, and auth is an amazing operator which creates for us an observable just from some value. It is not that useful in some real scenario, but if you have some predefined data that you want to simply convert once to the observable, it makes a lot of sense to use auth. Now let's have a look on another situation. Instead of auth, we can use here from. And what from does, it creates also an observable. You can see here it is still observable of number, but it does it in a different way. Let's have a look in browser. I'm reloading the page, and we're getting subscriber 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not as an array, but as different values, which essentially means it turns an array of data in the observable, not as a single value, not as auth, but one by one. And it is important to mention that here we got our console log 5 times. Our observer or subscriber is subscribed to the value change inside our stream. And this is our stream of data, which actually means when this stream changes, so the value changed from 1 to 2, we were notified inside our subscribe, and we console logged it. And here I want to show you an amazing website that I really like to use if I'm working with RxJS. The official website is rxjs.dev, and it does not have a best documentation. I really prefer to use learn.rxjs.io because with it is much easier to understand what specific method does. For example, here I opened from method, and here in black you can directly see what it does. It turns an array, promise or iterable, into an observable. And here on the bottom you can see examples. And it is important to understand that all this code doesn't have anything to do with the framework itself. This is just a normal RxJS code. But typically you want to communicate somehow with the framework. In our case it is Angular, so what we can do, we can just render in our markup this data that we got from our observable. This is why here I want to create a variable data, and let's say that this is a number. And by default it will be 0. Now here what we can do, we can write inside the property this .data, the data that we got from our stream. And now we can jump inside our HTML file and render here this variable by using double brackets and then data property inside. As you can see in browser, 5 was rendered. Essentially, all these numbers were rendered, but the last one in the stream was 5. This is why we see it on the screen. So you can write similar code in any framework, not only in Angular, but also, for example, in React or Vue. In this video, you will learn how to transform our data from different sources in RxJS streams. And as I already told you previously, we are getting data from different data streams. It can be an API call, just some plain data, or maybe a DOM event. All these things we want to transform to RxJS streams in order to work with them in the same way. So let's look how we can do that. So here inside my app component, I want to create an array of users. These are some plain data that we want to transform to our stream of data. And literally it can be any data, a boolean, a number, a string, or an array. So here let's create a users array with several elements. So here let's create a user 1 with name John and age 30. Now let's copy paste this user and change it to 2 and 3, and here let's name it Jack and Mike, and here let's change our age to 30 and 25. So we created our array of users. This is plain JavaScript. How we can create a stream of these users. And we have two different ways for it, and you already know them. It is either of or from. And just to remind you, the difference is that of simply takes a value once of the source, and from is taking an array and emits it for every single element. In the real world, we typically just want to take a value and convert it in the stream. We rarely use from in order to read every single element. This is why here, in order to create a stream of our users and emit it only once, because we have just a single value, which is an array, we can write of and provide inside our array of users. So now here, as a result, we are getting observable of our array of users. And in order to subscribe to it, we can write users.subscribe. We have our callback, so here we have access to our users, and we can console log our users here. So again, we have here our observable, and we have here our observer, which we are using with subscribe. As you can see in browser, we got users only once, and we are getting here the whole array. If you really want to emit every single user, obviously you need to use from, just like we did in previous video. But realistically, in a real example, you don't do that. So this is how we can convert plain JavaScript data to our stream, but we can do more. What if we have a promise to work with our API? So let's create here a message promise, and I want to call here new promise in order to create a real promise with a resolve function. And here let's write set timeout because we want to call our promise, for example, after 1 second. And after 1 second we want to resolve it, so we're calling resolve function and provide a message inside, for example, promise resolved. So this is the typical promise, how we are creating them, how we can read this promise and create a stream from it, because as we said, we can convert any data source to our stream. What we can do here, we can create a new stream of data, which will be our message. And here we're using from operator, and we're providing inside message promise. So here from is important, because if you just use of, you will get here inside as a value really a promise, not a resolved value. This is why with promises, you always want to use from. This is why now here we can write message with $subscribe, because we're subscribing to it, and we want to read this message from our promise. Now inside I want to just console log our message and check if it's working. As you can see in browser, I'm reloading the page, we're waiting 1 second, and then we're getting message promise resolved. This is our message from the promise. Most importantly, it was resolved and opened. This is why we got it. If here instead of from we will use of, you can see that we are getting zone aware promise and not really a data. This is not what we need. This is why when you are working with promises, you want to use from. And the last function that I want to show you is how we can convert events from DOM in our streams. And for example, let's say that we have a click event on body and we want to handle it with RxJS. We can do that here by creating a body click, which is also a stream. This is why $ here, and we're using a function from event. And this is exactly what we need if we want to convert our DOM event to a stream. And inside, first of all, we're providing a target. This is a DOM node where we want to handle an event. In our case, we can write here document because we want to handle any click on the page. And as a second parameter, I will provide our event. It will be click. And as you can see here, this is an observable of event, which actually means it is also a stream, but it has event as a data source. So here we can also write subscribe. We're getting our event. And now here I want to console log the whole event. So here will be event, event. Let's check if it's working. I'm reloading the page and clicking somewhere on the screen. And as you can see, every single time when I click, we're getting this event, which is our pointer event. So this is really a nice demonstration for you how streams and RxJS are working. We're converting different source of data, doesn't really matter from where this data are coming, to our streams of RxJS, which we can work with in a single, most comfortable for us way. And it is important to remember that we're talking here about stream of data. For example, our body click is showing it in the best way because it is not being executed once. With every single click, our stream is updated and our subscriber is notified. In this video, I want to talk about the differences between observables and promises. The main problem is that a lot of people, when they start working with RxJS or with Angular, they typically don't know how to work with it efficiently, and they really want to use something that they already know. And it is completely possible to convert our observable to the promise, and then they simply try to do that and work with streams like with observables just by converting them to the thing that they need, which essentially means here we have several streams, and you can get these streams from different sources. What they do instead of learning RxJS, they can simply write users $.toPromise, and after that they are writing then. Here they are getting an array of users, and they can write console log users. Let's check in browser. As you can see here, we got two console logs, one console log from our stream and second console log from our promise. Realistically, you might think, okay, we got the same result, but we're using here to promise then, and obviously all people know how promises are working in plain JavaScript. They don't need to learn RxJS. But here is an important point. Promises and observables are completely different things. You can't just take a promise instead of observable and work with it in the same way. And additionally, here you can see that toPromise method is deprecated. And when I hover on it, as you can see, what is written here is that this method was replaced with another method which is named firstValueFrom, which essentially means we can remove toPromise and wrap our users in firstValueFrom, and then this code won't give you any error. As you can see in browser, the result is the same, but the name of this method should hint to you what is the problem. FirstValueFrom or promise means that we will get a result only once, because this is one of the differences between promises and observables, which essentially means it is not correct to just take a stream, convert it to promise and use. And especially if you're using RxJS in Angular, this is an anti-pattern. You should not write this code at all, and you should not use promises in Angular instead of observables. So what are the real differences between observables and promises? The first difference you already saw. We can get new values through observable, like for example body click you already saw. We're clicking again and again, we're getting new values. It won't work like this with promises, because through promises we can get the result only once with the help of then function. Second important point, promises are not cancelable. So when the promise started, you can't really cancel it. And there are some discussions to implement this logic natively in plain JavaScript, but we don't have that yet. Observables, on the other hand, are cancelable, which essentially means you can cancel your observable at any time, and in the later videos we will do exactly that. One more important difference that with promises we don't have any additional functions which can help us. We simply have then, and then if we need some logic, we're just writing it inside then with plain code. We don't really have some helper methods to work together with promises. And on the other hand, when we're talking about observables, we have lots of different functions like map, filter, retry, take until, and lots of others which help us to work with observables. Another important difference is that promises are not lazy. For example, here, even if we remove then code, this is a promise and it is already executed, which essentially means promise is being executed always, even when you don't write there then or catch. On the other hand, observables are lazy. Without a subscriber, they won't emit anything at all. And the last important difference is how we are getting errors in promises and observables. Observables deliver errors directly to our subscribers. So we're writing subscribe, and if there's an error, then subscribers can handle this error. With promises it is different because we're getting errors inside the promise itself with then and catch. So you just need to remember, if you're using RxJS, you should not try to replace it just by using promises. It is not the same. In this video, I want to show you another way to subscribe to our observables. Let's have a look. Here I already have a promise from the previous video, and we're converting our promise to the observable by using from. What we wrote previously was message $.subscribe. Here we're getting our message from the stream and we're doing something with it. For example, we can simply console log here our message. As you can see, it works just fine. We have here our message promise resolved. But what you see here is the happy path. We're just providing a successful callback. There is also a full notation where we can write an error and completed state. This is why here I want to provide inside our subscribe an object with field next. And here inside next, I am just assigning our function. So essentially this code is exactly the same like we wrote previously. So our next is our success. Let's have a look. Again, we're getting promise resolved. We also are getting here an error, and inside we're getting some error as a parameter, and here we can write a console log for our error. And in order to trigger this error, for example, inside our promise, we can try to use not resolve but reject. And now I want to call reject instead of resolved. And I want to write here, for example, server error. Let's save this code and reload the page. As you can see, we're getting inside error and we rendered server error. This is this part that we handle here, which essentially means this is the success, this is an error state. And the last thing that we're getting is completed. So here we can write complete, we don't get any parameters, and we can simply write here console log, it is done. As you can see in browser, we don't see complete at all. Why is that? Because complete is being called when our stream is closed and completed, which actually means it happens only once when we want to complete our stream. What complete means is that we won't get any new values from our stream. It is basically dead. And by default, our stream is never complete. We can always push the new values. And we will talk about stream completions in the next video. What you need to remember now, we typically write the success form just with the callback, but if you need to handle an error, you will create an object with next and error functions. In this video, I want to show you how to create custom observables without any additional functions. As you can see here, I already prepared for us an array of users. And typically, if we want to create a stream where we emit every single user, we would use from, or if you need an array, we will use of. But how does it work under the hood? What I want to do here, I want to create a user stream by calling new observable. And what we need to provide inside is an observer. This is our subscriber. So here we have our observer as a parameter, and now inside we have some logic. We can write any logic here, and at the moment when we will write observer.next, and provide inside a value, it will be emitted. Let's have a look. Afterwards, I want to write users $.subscribe, just like previously. Here we're expecting our users, and I want to console log what we are getting. So essentially here we created our users dollar by using new observable provided inside observer. Let's have a look in browser. We're getting users 1. Why that? Because here when we created our new observable, we provided inside a callback with observer and we called next with 1. If I will write here several times observer and will change values and reload the page, as you can see our subscriber was notified 4 times that we are getting some changes. And here is an important point regarding complete from the previous video. What we can write after is observer.complete with round brackets, and it will complete our stream, which essentially means after this line nothing will happen, our stream is dead. Let's have a look. I want to put observer next after our completion with 5 and reload the page. As you can see, we don't get here 5, only 4, because our stream is completed and now we can't get new values from it. Which essentially means if here we create a next function, just like we did in the previous video, and additionally put here complete, if we want such callback, and we will write here console log completed, then we will get it exactly when this line will be called. Let's have a look. We're getting here completed after users 4. This is why our user 5 will never happen. Now let's have a look what functions do we have inside our observer. And as you can see, we have several of them. Mostly we're using next, error, complete, or unsubscribe. And we will talk about unsubscribe later. So now you know how from or off are working under the hood, which essentially means if we just need to simulate off when we're getting just a single value, we can simply throw here next our users array and we're getting our users just like we're using off function. But additionally to that, we can simulate a from method. So we can write here users.forEach, and for every single user, we just want to call our next. So it will be observer next, and we're providing a user inside. Let's have a look. We're getting here 3 emits with every single user. As you can see, there is no magic in methods like from or off. It is similar to several lines of code with just plain custom observer. In this video, I want to show you how to implement a custom observer by using class. And just from the beginning, I want to tell you, I don't recommend you to write code like this, and typically people are not using such approach. But if you ever see it in some code, you should not be scared. Let's have a look. So what I prepared here for us inside a component is just a stream with numbers where we're using from, which essentially means we have a stream where we will emit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now what we want to do here is create new file with the name customobserver.ts, and it will be a class. This is why here let's export our class customobserver, and we want to write implements observer of type number. Why of type number? Because we're writing our observer for this stream of numbers, which essentially means here we're also expecting to cover number stream. As you can see, when I'm hovering here, we're getting an error that we're missing the following properties, which are next, error, and complete, which essentially means we must implement inside this class all 3 fields just like we did when we used a normal subscribe. So we must implement here next, and we know that our stream is a stream of numbers, so inside data we're getting a number. What we can do here, any logic, in our case I just want to write console log next, and here is our data. Now I want to copy paste this 2 times because we want to cover our error function, and we know that here we're getting some error, which will be a string, and we want to console log this error. And the last one here will be a complete function where we don't have any parameters, but we know that it will be called when our stream is completed. So essentially, as you can see, the content of this class is exactly the same like an object inside subscribe method. but the main point is that this class is reusable. You can write any logic inside, this is your observer, and you can use it in different places without need to write this code every single time. So now we can jump back inside our app component and subscribe to it. And in order to do that, we want to write numbers.subscribe, and inside we are providing a new custom observer with round brackets that we just created, which essentially means this thingy will return for us an instance, which is an object, and the object is exactly what our subscribe wants. As you can see in browser, we are getting here success from 1 to 5 and then complete. And if you are curious why we got complete, because when we are using from and we are providing an array, we know exactly the last value of our stream. So essentially, custom observer is only needed when you need to share this logic across your application. If you simply need a subscribe, it doesn't make any sense to create a class. In this video, I want to mention one thing which might be obvious for you, but nevertheless I want to go through it. And I want to remind you that our observables are asynchronous, which actually means they are working in exactly the same way, like promises. In promises, we are typically writing something like promise.then, and we have some response, and inside our response we are writing some code, like console log response. This code is asynchronous, which actually means if we're writing here console log 1, and then after our promise we're writing console log 2, then first of all we will get this console log 1, then console log 2, because JavaScript is executed line by line, and only later, when this promise is resolved, we will see this console log. It happens because the code is asynchronous, exactly the same we're getting from subscribes with observables, because again our code is asynchronous, which actually means if here we have our console log 1 and here is our console log 2. When we reload the page we are getting 1, then all our code with successes and complete, and then 2, which might be extremely confusing for beginners because they might think, okay, the code is asynchronous and then this code must be executed later. The really good approach is to consider that your observables will always be asynchronous. Realistically, there are some cases where your observables will be synchronous, like in case here, when we have plain data, but it is much better to always treat them as asynchronous code and do that accordingly. And actually this is not an easy task because, for example, with promises we have async await, which literally makes our function asynchronous, but it is being executed like asynchronous line by line when we are using await keyword. We can't really do that with observables when we are writing a subscribe. We don't have any possibilities for this code to look synchronous like with async await. We literally always have subscribe, then we're getting some response, and this will be an asynchronous code for us. So here we can write console log response, and I will recommend you to always treat such code as asynchronous. So you never should wait that this console log or assignment to a variable will be done before your code afterwards. Because this code is asynchronous, this is why you must work in RxJS in specific way, and in later videos you will see how exactly. But just for now you must remember to always treat your streams of data as an asynchronous thing. And this was the end of the first chapter. If you want to dive deeper into learning RxJS, don't forget to check a link to the full course in the description box below.